Hello, everyone, and welcome to episode 5 of Metuchen the Past. This episode is it's one of those weird ones where it's almost too crazy to believe. In fact, it makes you say, "Did that really happen?" And I'm here to tell you, yes, it did happen. Otherwise, we wouldn't be doing a podcast on it. This episode is going to chronicle one of the great upsets in Brainy Borough history and perhaps even sports history in general. It deals with the Metuchen Semi-Pro Baseball Club taking on and beating the St. Louis Cardinals. That's right, the St. Louis Cardinals. St. Louis Cardinals, who were at the time of the game 2 years removed from being World Series champions. So if you will, let's all jump into a time machine real quick and take a quick trip back with me to the early days of baseball. Let's go back before the 1900s. Now, at that point in time, baseball, it was a national pastime. It truly was. It was all over the place. It was everywhere. Big cities had their pro teams like today, but small towns like Metuchen had clubs too. Local factories, athletic clubs, barnstorming squads, they all drew big crowds for their towns. In fact, the first time Metuchen was ever featured in the paper, it was in the Courier News. And it was in 1891, where they beat Rahway by a score of 8-0. The Metuchen Baseball Club in the years after that would pop in and out of leagues. They'd challenge other towns, and they would sometimes rebrand. One of the names that they called themselves was the Metuchen Marion Baseball Club. Marion, in this context, I looked it up, so I was curious. Marion means the star of the sea. What sea, you ask? I'm not quite sure. Tommy's Pond, maybe? I'm not really sure. By 1910, Metuchen Baseball Club had new uniforms, and these uniforms bore a striking resemblance to the colors of Metuchen that we know today. They were gray with blue trim, blue hats, and it sounds very similar to the ones that I wore growing up and I've seen other Metuchen teams wearing. These teams in the early 1900s would take on other semi-pro squads, such as teams from Brooklyn, the Potter section of Edison, Keesby. Whoever would take them on, Metuchen would be down for the battle. This was done through newspapers. They would put out ads. They would schedule games. Rivalries started. The Metuchen team would go strong for a little bit. They'd fold. They'd go strong. But Metuchen always had baseball. Now, fast forward to the 1930s. Metuchen baseball. I'll take a swig of my Bang energy drink here. Metuchen baseball was taking on teams, higher caliber teams of pretty good competition. Some of those teams actually came from the African American Baseball League. Such teams were called the Brooklyn Royal Giants. They played the Black Yankees, and they even played a team. This is a great name, by the way, the Detroit Clowns. Yes, that was the name of the team, the Detroit Clowns. Oddly enough, the Detroit Clowns, they would later move to Queens. They would rebrand, and they became your New York Mets. No, I'm just kidding. They're not the Mets. The Mets were never called the Clowns, but as of this recording, they're definitely playing like clowns. Here's the thing about the early days of baseball. It was also a golden era for exhibition games, and this includes for professional teams. So professional teams, even the biggest names in sports, they would regularly travel between league games to take on local or semi-pro teams. The exhibition served a lot of purposes. They kept players sharp. They gave fans in smaller towns a rare chance to see big league talent. And frankly, they made teams a little bit of extra money. You know, this was back in the day before blockbuster contracts and people making millions of dollars. So players legitimately needed the money that they accrued from these exhibition games in small local towns. So it wasn't unusual to see a major league roster roll into a small town ballpark like in Metuchen, play in front of a packed grandstand, and then hop on the train to their next scheduled game, often against another pro team back on their regular schedule. So for towns like Metuchen, these matchups took on bigger meaning. They were more than just a novelty. They were major community events. When semi-pro clubs got the chance to face, say, in this instance, the St. Louis Cardinals, it wasn't just a game. It was a moment that blurred the lines between local heroes and legends, legends who were legends on the national stage. Like they got to actually play against each other, some of the greats of the game. Which is really cool. In 1936, Metuchen's own baseball team did not just play the Cardinals. They beat them. They beat the St. Louis Cardinals. So following the loss against the Baccarat Giants of Atlantic City from the African American Baseball League, it was announced that the Metuchen baseball team would take on the St. Louis Cardinals on July 20th. The Metuchen Baseball Club, they frequently played their games at Legion Field, which is located on Durham Avenue, where present-day Campbell School stands. But the game was to take place at the Metuchen High School. St. Louis Cardinals, a little bit of background on them. This iteration of the Cardinals, they were known as the Gas House Gang. That's a cool name, Gas House Gang, for the gritty style of play. The Cardinals were fresh off World Series title in 1934 that they won over the Detroit Tigers. They were loaded with stars. These are great nicknames. Future Hall of Famers, Dizzy Dean, Frank Frisk, Joe Ducky Wucky Medwick. Ducky Wucky, that's awesome. Johnny Miz M-I-Z-E, I might be mispronouncing that, and Leo DeRocher. All Hall of Famers. Now, the contract said, because when I first heard about this, I was like, okay, maybe the Cardinals came to town, they were playing, but they're going to, sit their good players, and they're basically just going to mail it in. Metuchen, the Brainy Borough, they were ahead of that. They made a stipulation that the Cardinals had to play all of their players. I'll back that up. They had to be dressed and on the field at some point in the game. Not necessarily play, and that is a loophole that the Cardinals use to their advantage or disadvantage if you consider the outcome of the game. The Metuchen baseball team was composed of present and former players from the Lackawanna League, an independent baseball league that existed from 1905 to 1940. This league was based in New Jersey. The Metuchen Baseball Club had an infield that includes such players as Max Posnack, Jim Calloran, and fan favorite Ernie Sava. The club was managed by Pete Burnett. He was a former field captain and a manager of a Maplewood team that actually won the championship in the Lackawanna League, the Lackawanna Pennant, rather, in 1929 and in 1930. Which, again, Lackawanna League is kind of a minor league organization, so it's a pretty big accomplishment there. It should be noted that the Cardinals had a grueling schedule leading up to this game. They tried to keep their trip to Metuchen a secret. However, the secret was leaked, and numerous members of the Metuchen community greeted the Cardinals as they entered Metuchen Station on the Eastbound Express at 6:45 p.m. on July 20th, 1936. The main attractions for this game, Joe Ducky Wucky Medwick. Now, why was he a main feature of this game? Well, one, he was the second, he had the second best batting average in the National League at that time. And two, his home was in Carteret, New Jersey. So he was like a local kid coming home, which was interesting. It made for an interesting story. He was a member of the Gas House Gang. Another member of the Gas House Gang who was on their championship team from 34 was a guy by the name of Charlie Gelbert, who nearly lost his left foot in a hunting accident in the 1934 season. So he was in the midst of a comeback, and people thought it was a miracle because he wasn't expected to even walk again, let alone play baseball. And they said he did really well after almost losing his foot, rather. Now, it was said in an article from the July 20th edition of the Courier News that leading up to the game, the Metuchen team had been, interesting choice of words, dickering with their lineup, meaning they were looking at players from multiple cities. So it wasn't just a Metuchen local team taking on the Cardinals. It essentially, from my research, it was a minor league all-star team playing against a major league team in an exhibition. Not least of which on this team was a guy by the name of Bud Humphreys, who was a local guy, a Metuchen high school alumni. He was the starting pitcher for this game against the Cardinals. At the time of this game, he was playing for a semi-pro team, the Brooklyn Bay Parkways. And during this baseball season, he was regarded as the best semi-pro pitcher in New York. So again, you weren't dealing with just a slouch who couldn't throw the ball. You were dealing with somebody who was essentially major league caliber talents. The Cardinals pitched two pitchers who had great careers, but they were at the very ending of their careers. Bill Walker and Flint Rem, both pitchers were members of the 1934 World Series champion Cardinals. But both players were released shortly after this game. And the Cardinals, who in this game, you'll see they gave up a lot of runs. They did not want to go into their bullpen. So they showed up, they played, but they didn't quite put 100% effort into this exhibition game. So the game, which took place July 20th at 9 p.m. under the lights at Metuchen High School, had about 5,000 spectators in attendance. So people flocked to the ballpark, and a lot of them wanted to see the Cardinals uniforms that were bright red, blue, and white. And it kind of stood out from some of the more drab colors from the day. So a lot of people thought it was cool to see that in person. This big crowd, and it's a good thing they won, the Metuchen, the homeboys won, because supposedly the concession stand, while they had a lot of peanuts and they sold a limitless amount of peanuts, apparently, they ran out of soda. So you had a very thirsty crowd watching this game in the middle of July. Had Metuchen lost, I don't know what would happen. This might have been a completely different episode. Regardless, Bud Humphreys, the pitcher for Metuchen, had the game of his life. He pitched a complete game, which is rare by today's standards. He had 8 strikeouts and gave up only 7 runs. For the most part, he was able to silence the bats of the Cardinals stars, which included Ducky Wucky Medwick, Ripper Collins, and Frankie Fisk. The Cardinals played all of their players in this game with the exception of a gentleman named Pepper Martin. However, as I said before, there was a little bit of a loophole with this, the contract that was signed. It said that all players had to be on the field and in uniform, but it didn't necessarily say in what capacity. So Dizzy and Daffy Dean, 2 big stars for the Cardinals at that point, did enter the game and were briefly in their uniforms for an inning apiece as first and third base coaches. So they didn't really play much at it. They didn't really contribute to the game. And Cardinal players, their stars, a lot of them, they played an inning or 2 and they went back to their hotel. Because 1, it was a late night game, it was 9 p.m. 2, the grueling schedule, and 3, they had to play at the Polo Grounds against the Giants early the next day. So they wanted to get out of Dodge pretty quickly. Ernie Sabo for the hometown heroes, the Metuchen Baseball Club. He was a career minor leaguer. He was a fan favorite of the locals, and he went 3 for 5 in the contest with 3 singles. It's sometimes reported he almost hit for the cycle, going 4 for 5, but that apparently was not true. He went 3 for 5, still pretty impressive. This game had a kind of wacky rule. So the crowd at Metuchen High School jammed all sides of the field. Giving some of the players an insufficient amount of room to field some of the balls that were hit their way. Therefore, as long as a ball was fair initially, if the ball went into the crowd, it was deemed a ground rule double, which made for some wackiness in the game as they had 13 ground rule doubles. 13. So a little bit of shenanigans went down here. Here is a game summary. Now, close your eyes. Imagine you're at Metuchen High School. You're packed in the stands. You're watching the St. Louis Cardinals take on the Metuchen Baseball Club. Here we go. Walker started the game for the Cardinals and Humphreys for Metuchen. They both put up zeros through the first 3 innings. In the top of the fourth, the Cardinals broke the scoring open when with 2 outs, Ogrgowski doubled over the third and scored when Leo DeRocher hit to Metuchen player John Jervian, who committed an error. This made the game 1-0 Cardinals. In the bottom of the fourth, Metuchen came right back. They had 3 runs, which started with 2 outs. The next 5 men, 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, hit safely. Metuchen took a 3-1 lead. In the bottom of the fifth, Metuchen added another run on consecutive doubles from Posnack and Gervin, making up for that earlier error he had in the game. 4-1 Metuchen. In the top of the sixth, the Cardinals came right back to tie the game at 4. They scored 3 runs on 2 doubles, a pass batsman, an error, and an outfield sacrifice fly. 4-4 going into the bottom of the sixth. Rem enters the game for the Cardinals, replacing Walker. Metuchen really beat up on Rem a little bit here. So Metuchen responded by scoring 5 runs in the bottom of the sixth. Bill Newsom of Plainfield started it by drawing a pass from Rem and advanced on a Humphreys sacrifice. 5 hits and an error, plus some slow fielding on the part of the Cardinals, during which they were said to have looked like a sandlot club, brought about the scoring spree. Metuchen took a commanding 9-4 lead. The 7th inning, scoreless on both sides. And at the top of the 8th, the Cardinals scored 3 runs on 3 hits, an error, and a walk. 9-7 Metuchen. Things are getting a little bit close now, right? A little bit tight. But Ernie Sabo would have none of that. In the bottom of the 8th, Ernie Sabo doubled to score Hall, giving Metuchen a much-needed insurance run. And at the top of the 9th, Humphreys, not one to be taken out of the game of his life, finished the game doing his best Mariano Rivera or Rivera didn't pitch complete games. That's a bad analogy. But you get what I'm saying. He came in, he took care of business. In the 9th inning, he gave up a double, but he didn't allow any other runs. Game, set, match, the Metuchen Baseball Club. 10-7 over the St. Louis Cardinals. In the game, Metuchen's left fielder Hall went 4 for 5, and Metuchen's favorite, as I said before, Ernie Sabo, he had 3 hits with 3 singles. In the aftermath, local papers said it was the most important sporting event in Borough history. Cardinals played their stars, the fan went nuts, and Metuchen walked away as giant killers. The Cardinals, for their part as well, were said to be very friendly. In fact, and this was kind of a bizarre statement here, another swig of my Bangoo. Bizarre statement. It was said, if you said anything about Dizzy Dean was so liked that if you said anything about him, you would probably get shot. I'm just reading what the research said for me. Pitcher Flint Rem, who participated in the game, and the conversation with the Metuchen recorder also said Metuchen is a town that appreciates good baseball. And he also said the fans were a lot nicer to him and his teammates than in other big cities. So that was pretty cool. Ed Reagan, who was another manager of the team and a player manager who played a little bit for the club as well, he was successful in promoting the event. And it was seen as an overall boost for the borough, the team, the players, and all the residents of the community. So overall, a big success. Now, opinions in the paper felt the strain of the Cardinals' pennant chase hindered their club, specifically their pitching. As we said, they didn't want to go into their bullpen, and they kind of let their 2 aging stars get smacked around a little bit by Metuchen. Additionally, the Cardinals' home stadium, and I thought this was interesting, Sportsman Park, they did not have lights until 1940. So they had to play a game under the lights, which 9 p.m. start in Metuchen High School. Supposedly they weren't used to playing under the lights, something that the Brainy Borough was very accustomed to at that point. In July alone, considering the grueling schedule here, the Cardinals had doubleheaders at Cincinnati, in Brooklyn, well, at home against Brooklyn. They played a doubleheader against the Boston Bees the day before playing Metuchen, and the next afternoon, after playing the night game in Metuchen, they were going to have to play the New York Giants at the Polo Grounds. So it was they were going through a tough stretch. You were not catching a well-rested Cardinals team for this game. It was shocking, but it wasn't impossible. It should be noted, Major League Baseball, it has seen its share of professional teams lose to local teams in exhibitions. And I'm going to give you some examples real quick. In 1963, the International League All-Stars beat the New York Yankees 5-0. And that Yankee team had Mickey Mantle, Roger Maris, and Whitey Ford on its roster. In 1951, the Ottawa Giants beat the New York Giants 4-1. That was also another, I guess you could say, an upset. 1948, and this is great, the Scranton Miners scored 2. Boston Red Sox won. So the Scranton Miners took down the Red Sox. In 1962, the Williamsport Grays defeated the Philadelphia Phillies 6-3. In 1955, the York White Roses scored 13, and the Baltimore Orioles had 1. And it should also be noted that wartime service teams, who had a collection of professional players playing at a time when a lot of the professional teams were missing some of their big names due to World War II. The wartime service teams a lot of times beat major league teams, what was left of the major league teams, such as the Phillies, Red Sox, Browns, the Cubs, the White Sox, the Giants. In fact, their record, the wartime service teams, were 48-2 overall against professional teams. So they do lose exhibition games, not regularly, but it absolutely does occur, professional teams in exhibitions. One great example involving a game with a Major League Baseball team that wasn't as much an upset as just a great story. It was an exhibition game that was held on April 2nd, 1931. The Chattanooga Lookouts from the Southern Association of Minor League Baseball, and they eventually joined the Washington Senators. They lost to the New York Yankees by a score of 14-4. However, this game is very notable because 17-year-old Jackie Mitchell, who's the pitcher for the Chattanooga Lookouts, struck out Babe Ruth and Lou Gehrig consecutively before walking Tony Lazzerle. Babe Ruth and Lou Gehrig. That is pretty amazing when you think about it. So Jackie Mitchell, by the way, in case you weren't sure, she was a female pitcher. So a female pitcher struck out Babe Ruth and Lou Gehrig. Following the game, the commissioner, Kennesaw Mountain Landis, voided Mitchell's contract and said that baseball was too strenuous for women. So after striking out Ruth and Gehrig, her reward was getting cut from the team. Terrible. Babe Ruth, I know it's going to shock people, but a rich white person in the 1930s was not the most progressive and not the most open-minded and had kind of an ignorant stance on this event. Babe Ruth, in fact, was quoted as saying, "I don't know what's going to happen." Keep in mind, he just struck out to this pitcher. "I don't know what's going to happen if they begin to let women in baseball. Of course, they're never going to make good. Why? Because they're too delicate. It would kill them to play ball every day. Try giving birth, Mr. George Herman Ruth." At least that's what my wife was saying. She's right. It's not, I don't know. I don't know if I agree with Ruth on this one. I think women are pretty tough. Finally, and more recently, in March 2024, the Yankees played a 2-game exhibition series in Mexico City, against the Diablos Rojos del Mexico of the Mexican League. The Yankees lost both games, and it was considered an upset given the relative strength of the MLB team compared to the Mexican League team. One of the highlights, or lowlights, depending on how you look at it, was that Trevor Bauer, a former Major League pitcher, a disgraced Major League pitcher, look him up, he's not a good guy, pitched for the Diablos Rojos, he beat the Yankees in the first game. Finally, getting towards the ending here, a quick recap just to tell you what happened. So following the game against the Cardinals, the future baseball Metuchen, by the 40s, the team was still around. The Metuchen Baseball Club would eventually change their name by 1940 to the Metuchen Eagles Baseball Club. I always think of Eagles with Edison, so I thought that was a little bit weird. On Saturday, April 2nd, 1949, the Metuchen Eagles Baseball Club had tryouts at Edgar Field. And that's notable because it felt like that was like the last gasp for semi-pro baseball in Metuchen, because by the 1950s, from my research, the Metuchen Eagles, Metuchen Baseball Club, the Metuchen Marians, however you want to call them, not really being reported on. Today, you will see various reports or stories about the game against the St. Louis Cardinals on July 20th, 1936, which, hey, I know there were some caveats in there, but all upsets have their share of caveats. And it was still quite a legendary feat for, a bunch of semi-pro to take on a team that was 2 years removed from winning the World Series. So I thought that was awesome. That was just a little more Brainy Borough history, guys, for Metuchen the Past. I'm James Farley. Thank you so much for listening, for watching. If you're watching, we're going to be back with another episode next week. We have it lined up. We have a special guest coming in, so I'm excited for that. So keep listening and take care. Goodbye.